Hello. Today we're going to be ranking every Colossal Sword in Elden Ring. There are 11 Colossal Swords in total, 6 with their own unique skills. Each Colossal Sword has their own variation of attacks, which will show up during each ranking. And if you do enjoy these types of videos, be sure to like and subscribe, and on with the video. And at number 11, the worst Colossal Sword in Elden Ring will be the Troll Knight's Sword. This sword has a weight of 18 and relatively low physical damage. However, it does get intelligence scaling and magic damage as recompense. The sword has a decently low weight for a Colossal Sword and a pretty low attribute requirement. Its one-handed light attacks look like this. Its one-handed heavy attacks look like this. Its two-handed light attacks look like this. And its two-handed heavy attacks look like this. Now the problems with this sword begin with its skill, the Troll's War, which is also shared with the Troll's Golden Sword. However, unlike the Troll's Golden Sword, it cannot equip an Ash of War, which starts to become a problem because the Troll's War is not the best skill. The skill consists of a roar that staggers enemies, followed by a hard downward swipe. Now in PvE, this skill might be handy for staggering a group of enemies and dealing huge damage with the downward swipe. However, this doesn't seem very practical against bosses, and I'm sure you're not catching out anyone in PvP with this. Although I do like its design, it has a nice blue gem at the base. But it'll be taking the 11th spot. And at number 10, we have the Watchdog's Greatsword. It has a relatively high weight of 22 and solid strength scaling, as well as a attribute requirement of 30 strength. Now the reason this is so low is because it gets completely outclassed by another one of these Colossal Swords, and is pretty hard to obtain since you have to grind for it. However, you can equip Ash of Wars to it, which is quite nice. Its one-handed light attacks look like this. Its one-handed heavy attacks look like this. Two-handed light attacks look like this. And its two-handed heavy attacks look like this. Overall, it's not a bad sword, it just seems to get outclassed and doesn't really provide much over the others, so it'll be taking the 10th spot. And at number 9, we have the Zweihander. This is the lightest Colossal Sword with a weight of 15.5. But because of this, it does have relatively low damage for a Colossal Sword. However, it can be accessed pretty early on in the game. It has pretty low attribute requirements at a strength of 19 and a dex of 11. And it also has more dex scaling than some of the other Colossal Swords. Its one-handed light attacks look like this. One-handed heavy attacks look like this. Two-handed light attacks look like this. And the two-handed heavy attacks look like this. Despite this weapon have relatively low physical attack, it is not really all that low as a whole. It still has relatively high damage per hit, and like the Watchdog's Greatsword, you can also equip an Ash of War. And with the lowest attribute requirement of 19 strength, this is rather accessible, so it'll be taking the 9th spot. And at number 8, we have the Troll's Greatsword, coming in at a weight of 19, which is a pretty moderate weight for a Colossal Sword. Coming in at a relatively high damage, and much like the Zweihander, having an alright dex scaling. Its one-handed light attacks look like this. One-handed heavy attacks look like this. Two-handed light attacks look like this. And two-handed heavy attacks look like this. The Troll's Golden Sword also comes with the skill Troll's Roar, which I don't believe to be all that great. However, you are able to equip an Ash of War, which does make it significantly better. So it'll be taking the number 8th spot. And at number 7, we have the Grafted Blade Greatsword. It has a weight of 21 and requires 40 strength. Now what's interesting about it is its unique skill, the Oath of Vengeance, which increases all of your attributes by 5 for 30 seconds. It's also supposed to increase your poise, however I do not know by how much or even if it increases poise at all. Overall, the skill is pretty mediocre, especially later on in the game where it'll get heavily outscaled, but a little buff to your stats doesn't hurt. One-handed light attacks look like this. One-handed heavy attacks look like this. Two-handed light attacks look like this. And the two-handed heavy attacks look like this. Despite its high requirements, this sword is achieved pretty early on in the game. Now other than the small stat boost, this really is just a pretty big sword. Although I do like the design, the idea of a sword made of multiple swords is interesting. And it'll be taking the number 7th spot. And at number 6 we have the Royal Greatsword. Coming in at a weight of 22, it requires 26 strength, 18 dex, 22 intelligence, and scales primarily with strength and intelligence. Now the interesting part about this sword is its unique skill, the Wolf's Assault. You make a jump and at the end you release a cold blast. This can deal a solid amount of damage, however it is very telegraphed and even the explosion is delayed. One-handed light attacks look like this. One-handed heavy attacks look like this. Two-handed light attacks look like this. And two-handed heavy attacks look like this. This sword seems to be okay in both PvP and PvE. It also has a nice grandeur design, and it'll be taking the number 6 spot. And at number 5 we have the Scourge Greatsword. This sword has a weight of 20, it requires 38 strength, 12 dexterity, 15 intelligence, and scales mostly with strength. This sword is very unique in the fact that with only one weapon slot, you do get 2 swords whenever you two-handed. And because of this is a bit more unique than holding 2 weapons. That is, you're able to block, and to attack with both weapons you're able to press R1 or right bumper instead of L1 or left bumper. The other interesting thing about this sword is its unique skill, the Starcrawler Cry. The skill pulls in enemies with a gravitational wave and slams the 2 swords down, creating a massive explosion. However, I personally find this to be too slow for use in PvP. It does do a hefty chunk of damage and might be useful in PvE. One-handed light attacks look like this. One-handed heavy attacks look like this. Two-handed light attacks look like this. And its two-handed heavy attacks look like this. Overall, I do like the idea of having 2 giant swords in only one slot. That is quite the big bonus. Really saving a lot on weight here. And in my opinion, 2 is better than 1, so that is quite nice. However, in PvP, I do not find the skill to be all that helpful, although I'm sure it can easily do a solid chunk of damage in PvE, so it'll be taking the number 5 spot. And at number 4, we have the Godslayer's Greatsword. This Colossal sword has a weight of 17.5, has an attribute requirement of 20 strength, 22 dex, 20 faith, and scales most with dex, which is very unique for a Colossal sword. This sword has a unique attack animation, which I will show off in a bit, and its unique skill, the Queen's Black Flame, can do massive damage. Although the attack is pretty slow, so it can be difficult to use in PvP. Its one-handed light attacks look like this. One-handed heavy attacks look like this. Its two-handed light attacks look like this. And its two-handed heavy attacks look like this. This sword seems like it'd be great for PvE, not just because of the skill, but also that the sword has fire damage, which is best used in PvE, as in PvP a lot of armors resist fire very well. However, it does have a unique attack animation. It does seem to be a bit faster than most Colossal swords. So that is a nice bonus, and this will be taking the number 4 spot. And at number 3 we have Malachus Black Blade, and whether I like it or not, the most viewed video on my channel features this weapon. It has a weight of 22, has an attribute requirement of 34 strength, 12 dexterity, and 20 faith, and it scales most with strength and faith. And the fun part of this sword being its unique skill, Destined Death, which plunges the sword into the ground, creating an explosion of slices, and much like the Godslayer's Greatsword, also does some burn damage on top of it. Also decreasing their maximum HP, because why not? Benefits of this sword over the Godslayer's Greatsword is it has higher base values in its damage, and it also does holy damage, which is less resisted in PvP. One-handed light attacks look like this. One-handed heavy attacks look like this. Two-handed light attacks look like this. And its two-handed heavy attacks look like this. This sword's skill can do a lot of damage, however it can be rather hard to land in PvP, as it is rather slow. Therefore it's probably best in PvE, where you can get the most use, where you'll actually be able to hit your enemy. Also, this is probably my favorite design of the Colossal swords. I love the yellow glow in the coal-like blade, thus it'll be taking the number 3 spot. Our number 2 entry of this list might surprise you. At number 2 we'll have the Greatsword. It has a weight of 23, it has an attribute requirement of 31 strength, 12 dex, and scales mostly with strength. This is, in my opinion, the best sword to equip in Ash of War 2. It has some of the highest base damage of all Colossal swords. It has higher damage than Watchdog's Greatsword, while also being easier to obtain. And being able to equip Ash of Wars can be quite nice, as you can equip it to almost any build and use a variety of really strong Ash of Wars. One-handed light attacks look like this. One-handed heavy attacks look like this. Two-handed light attacks look like this. And its two-handed heavy attacks look like this. As you can see, its heavy attacks have a lot of sweeps, as opposed to most Colossal swords having either pokes or downward swipes. But yeah, this is just the good old trusty Greatsword, always reliable, so it'll be taking the number 2 spot. And in the number 1 spot, the best Colossal sword, in my opinion, will be the Ruins Greatsword. It has a weight of 23, it has the attribute requirements of 50 strength, 16 intelligence, and mostly skills with strength. Despite it having access to magic damage, it is mostly physical. But the best part is the unique skill, Wave of Destruction. This will slam the sword on the ground and create a massive shockwave that goes quite the distance. It's also one of the most visually pleasing skills in the game. It's just really awesome. Its one-handed light attacks look like this. One-handed heavy attacks look like this. Its two-handed light attacks look like this. And its two-handed heavy attacks look like this. And as a little thing, when you use a charged heavy attack, you also create a little shockwave in front of you. That's just a neat thing that shouldn't affect things too much, but it is a cool little bonus. Its unique skill can be incredibly powerful in PvE. It can hit enemies from rather far away and do a massive chunk of damage to them as well. It can be difficult to hit in PvP, however, I'm sure it is easier to hit than some of the other Colossal Swords skills in this list. So yeah, it'll be taking the #1 spot. I do believe this is the best Colossal Sword in Elden Ring. And please do keep in mind, this is just my opinion. You could think the Ruins Greatsword is ass and think the Grafted Blade Greatsword is the best thing ever. Who cares really, it's just my opinion. Please be sure to like the video, and if you haven't already subscribed to the channel, I'd like to try to get 1,000 subscribers by the end of the year, and that's a nice little goal for us to try to get to. And be sure to follow me on Twitch, as I am trying to go live a bit more often, and I'll be sure to play more Elden Ring on there sometime soon in the future. But that'll be it from me. Y'all have a good one.